I am Aditya,
And I'm Naina.
and we are here to talk to you about why you might have been paying too much for your plane tickets. How might this have happened? It is caused by the non-transparent nature of online markets and exacerbated by the behavior-driven advertising infrastructure. And what we will show today is that when we collected 1.1 million flight records and 4.2 million hotel records, we found that some consumers are losing up to $6 on average compared to the best performing profile, just 33 times more likely that you would expect to see by chance. Why might this be happening? Well, we are inclined to believe in large online e-commerce systems that we are all kind of shopping on the same platforms. In reality, we're effectively really shopping alone. We are really unaware about what other consumers are actually seeing and buying and the prices that they are experiencing. This lack of transparency combined with behavior tracking gives sellers an opportunity to differentiate prices to different consumers.
So to figure out if this differential pricing is happening, we need to conduct an online audit. But conducting online audits is difficult. Traditional in-person audits ensure that the broker and auditor are in consensus. They agree on the identities of the applicants because they are seeing them in person. When conducting online audits, it is difficult to ensure that the identity of the consumer is perceived by the seller in the way that the experimenter or auditor intended. In response to this difficulty, prior audits of online markets create sock puppets with assumed identities based off website visits. Dutta, Asplund, and Mikians all create sock puppets, and some of these researchers make claims of intentional discrimination or disparate impact to demographic groups due to differential pricing. While browsing behaviors may be associated with some identities, for example, maybe older adults are more likely to browse retirement home sites, there is no guarantee that the identity intended by the researcher is the same as the identity perceived by the seller. So what can we be certain of? If we construct profiles by visiting different sets of websites, we can be sure that the seller perceives these profiles as being distinct. In our framework, we say that we have achieved consensus between the researcher and sellers.
So in collecting our data, we have 9 existing profiles from existing literature. We then, for each of these queries we might run, such as, let's say we want to book a flight from LA to New York, we have these agents first initially visit their profile websites to construct their identity. Then we have, at the same time, executing the query simultaneously, and then we record the good, the seller, and pricing information. An example of that you can see down here for sample result. Now, we could try to figure out, if we just look at the average pricings, if we look at example here, each dot representing an average price for a profile, it's not terribly informative. In particular, we don't have any causal structure to this explanation, and we don't really see how different sellers might be actually treating these profiles a little bit differently.
So to figure out how we are actually going to model our data, here we will show you our DAG, or directed acyclic graph, for modeling price differences. So the outcome is price differences. The factors that might affect this price difference are the query, the 2 different profiles, and the seller. The query affects the seller, meaning the query causes the seller to show up and offer a good. Profiles X and Y both affect the price difference via an unobserved confound. We call this the direct effect of the profile. And then profile in conjunction with seller causes a profile-seller interaction, which then also affects the price difference. So you can see the only 2 things affecting the price difference are the profile-seller interaction and the direct effect of profile via the unobserved confound. This model eliminates confounds that we encountered when trying to model price alone. And because we aren't modeling price, we don't need to know the seller's pricing mechanism specifically. So this can be applied to other black box audits. And then below you can see an example of the data that we would need to input to this model. And then the pink and the yellow are just exemplifying the effects from profile X versus profile Y. So now we'll talk about how we translate this DAG to the equations that we actually use to model price differences. So Y is the indicator outcome variable, whether buyers I and J see different prices from seller K. This is our outcome in the DAG. Then we have probability, representing the probability that buyers I and J see different prices. This is just how we're going to model the indicator variable. And then the probability is made up of the base probability that any buyers see different prices, plus the direct effect that we talked about. It's the difference between the direct effects between profile X and Y via the unobserved confound. And then profile seller interaction is here represented by delta, and that is the difference in seller profile interaction effect on the probability.
So from here, we can kind of run the data that we collected through this modeling to determine how often, how likely it is for a profile to be differentially treated against by a given seller. And in a summary, we can see in this figure, we're plotting how often a given seller differentially treats a certain number of profiles. What we can see here is that in the flight market, nearly most sellers are differentially treating all of the profiles, while in the hotel market, it's a little bit less likely to occur across all profiles, but still a decent amount of differentiation happening. We can examine more closely a specific seller to understand their strategy. If we zoom in, this is for a single seller with the 8 profiles plotted here compared to a reference profile. We can note here is that we have the baseline probability of any 2 profiles seeing a different price around 8%. And if we examine any one of these curves, these are plotting the full posteriors of the probability of this profile seeing a higher price than the reference profile. In this specific example, we see for this curve that the 89% HCPI interval ranges from 58 to 65%. We can then examine more closely why it is important to focus on these behaviors as opposed to just thinking about the identities. So these 2 profiles are meant to represent, from 2 different literatures, both meant to represent senior identities. But as you can see, they have actually quite a bit different effects. So the bottom curve is a wider interval and also has a less likely effect, while on the right-hand side, we see a very narrow curve and an extremely high likelihood of differentiation. So if we were thinking about seniors as identity, if we don't choose these identities carefully, we can get very different results. We can then look at, okay, what is the actual dollar price impact to this type of differentiation occurring? And what we can see here, we can plot a summary of this again. And what we see here is that in both the hotel and flight market, the cost can range anywhere from 10 to 50 cents in hotels specifically, versus in flights. Many profiles are seeing over 50 cents, and a lot of them are actually seeing more than $3, paying more than the reference profile. We can again zoom in for a specific seller to see a seller-specific strategy, and we can see here some of the curves are overlapping, some of them not. But you can see these are real dollar price impacts happening to these profiles. Again, if we focus on a specific, even a more specific 2 profiles, we can see that these differences are non-overlapping and also significant. And again, since these are supposed to represent 2 senior profiles, we can still see that they don't really have any overlap.
All right, so we just showed you that differential pricing causes measurable monetary loss to consumers. And how can we fix this issue? One fix is to have laws requiring disclosures on previous transaction prices. This goes back to the non-transparent nature of the market. Even if sellers are differentially pricing goods, consumers would then be able to make more informed purchasing decisions in a transparent market. Another option is to limit tracking by third parties. This would limit differential pricing by sellers on behavior. And if these changes prove infeasible, we would propose a platform to allow for voluntary disclosure of prices by consumers, which would require consumer cooperation. So our findings show that many of you probably paid too much for your tickets here. This issue is due to lack of price transparency and exacerbated by online tracking via the computational advertising infrastructure. We use sock puppets and a causal framework to unambiguously show that sellers in the flight and hotel markets are differentially pricing identical goods. leading to consumers in general paying more. We hope our work will be used to conduct causal audits in the future and help bring transparency to opaque markets. Thank you.